All right, everybody, thank you as always for listening and this time watching. This week we have another great retirement planner chat episode with my buddy Jamie Lima. Hey Jamie, how are you?
Hey man, thanks for having me. Of
Yeah, looking forward to you being on and thanks for doing this. So,
course.
those who don't know, Jamie and I, like many advisor folk I know, we sort of met online through LinkedIn or what have you over the last handful of years, often during pandemic, and then met Jamie and others along the way at conferences once the world opened back up after pandemic. So I actually met Jamie in person, I think it was last year at a conference. Does that sound about right?
XYPN Live last year,
There you go, in Hotlanta, yeah.
Atlanta.
And so I already knew and liked Jamie from the online world, met him in person, and he was, everything I thought and hoped he was. And so we stayed in touch, and I thought he'd be a great person to have on, as we'll sort of tease out through the episode here. Jamie's been in the business a while, very seasoned planner, and he, in the last couple years or so, really honed in on a sort of subspecialization of divorce and planning around divorce in the financial planning context. So, for better or worse, that is a topic, and it's a thing that, the name Great Divorce you all may have heard of. It's something that applies to people entering near retirement as well, just as, much as the masses in general, if not more. So I thought Jamie would be a great guy to have on and sort of bridge the divide, or at least combine the topics of retirement planning with some of the divorce specialization angles. So, quick intro, then I'll let Jamie, you explain yourself a little bit more. But Jamie is the founder of Woodson Wealth Management outside of San Diego, works throughout the country, but based outside of San Diego, and also Allegiant Divorce Solutions, which I'll let Jamie touch on. So, Jamie, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your firms, et cetera?
Yeah, thanks for the intro. It was good to see you again, man. I've been around the block for a little bit. I'm creeping up on 20 years of doing this. I can't believe I'm going to
Man,
say that. We were just talking on as we're leading up to this call that I think we're recording this on November 5th, election day here. And I think this is my fourth election. So it's been a little while that I've been around the block here, but I cut my teeth in the financial services industry at a big name firm, and back in 2005, 2006. Left that company, went to another big name firm that I was there for about 10 years or so, and then in 2020, my timing was impeccable as we all know what happened in April of 2020, which is when I launched my company. I decided, hey, why would I not just want to leave the confines of a, W-2 salary with, reasonable income and all the benefits and nice cush office to start my own thing with no clients, no revenue, no income. Like
yeah. What
genius,
what
right?
can go wrong, right?
What could go wrong? What could go wrong? But looking back, it was a great experience. It's been amazing. I get to meet awesome people like you and other planners that are really focused on doing the right thing for our clients at all times and avoiding conflicts of interest. And that was something I wanted to really hone in on for the second half of my career, so to speak. Right. And
Right.
so been doing that. And then in the last couple of years, I've pivoted a little bit and started to focus on divorce financial planning. I went and got my CDFA designation, which is a certified divorce financial analyst, alongside with my CFP designation, which I already had. And now we help people with all of the financial nuances of a divorce, which can get a little bit squirrely, as you can probably guess. But
Yeah.
that's the
And
gist.
you also have a great, relatively new, started some point this year, right? A podcast called Broke Up, Not Broken.
I did. I've been a firm believer in education around all things financial for many, many years. And when in my old life in corporate finance world, big name firm world, I actually coached and trained financial advisors. So I have a passion for education around these things and educating clients because they don't teach you the stuff that we deal with every day in school.
Yeah.
And when it comes to divorce specifically, even having the education I had and the experience that I had when I was going through my own divorce, I made some mistakes along the way. And if me being a financial professional doing that and having those issues, I know other people out there feeling the same way and up against a lot of things that they look back and regret. So here we are.
Yeah. And it's a fantastic podcast. I shared it within the Facebook group, I don't know, a month or two ago. It's on my, library of podcasts I listen to. You have some really great guests, really great information, very straightforward, thoughtful, reasonable, pragmatic guidance and education for people. So for anyone interested, Broke Up, Not Broken is Jamie Shell. I'll be sure to share a link to it in the notes of this episode. So as it relates to retirement planning, I know you came from a big name place where you're probably working with, lots of people doing all things to all people. What was sort of your introduction or background in getting into kind of the retirement specific things of the financial planning world?
Well, I mean, when I was again big name company, I'm not going to name the name, but so you just keep hearing that from me,
Mhm.
as we're having this conversation. But I had 450 clients I was working with, man.
Wow.
Like 450 clients. In our world, the listeners in our world, when we talk about the clients we work with and the amount of assets we're responsible for, the term we use is book. So my book of clients had assets in the neighborhood of like $1.2 billion. It was not small. But frankly, man, the only thing that really got me at the end of the day was, my branch manager coming in every afternoon asking me how many more phone calls I could make, right? But what it did, it was an opportunity to have this proving ground, so to speak, and I learned a lot. I met with a lot of different people from all different walks of life, but it was the same, seemed to be the same common threads that they all had, which was they're now leaving the accumulation phase of their life where they're working, they're saving, they're just, putting their head down and just grinding it out and just trying to save as much as they can. And then all of a sudden one day that gig is over and they've got to figure out how they're going to distribute those assets and remove that money from accounts and what have you over a period of time that could very well be just as long as the time that they were working.
Yeah.
And like if you can't figure that out as an advisor, you're not going to last very long. So I feel like I had an amazing proving ground to work with that many people to help them through all those things, and because I had a lot of practice with that many people.
Hmm. I can imagine you got your reps in, so to say.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said this before, the decumulation stage of life, the having to start to spend your nest egg as opposed to just accumulate it, really is more difficult, more involved. There's, I want to say, more areas of opportunity for planning, but I sort of feel there is. Compared to when you're working, it's kind of on autopilot, right? I mean, spend less than you make and save the rest. Now, I guess to save the rest can go a lot of different ways, but oftentimes it's just pump it into a 401k or some other sort of brokerage account or whatever. And that's kind of it. And then you get to retirement. It's like, ooh, what do I do with these different monies and accounts, and how do I actually spend it and tie together like tax implications of it? There's a lot to it. So I get why people get sort of no, not concerned, but they're good DIYers to the accumulation stage of life. Then get to retirement. It's like, I don't know what to do with this stuff now.
Yeah.
Enter, folks like us. So
And because if you get it wrong, it's a big problem.
right, yep. And there's
A
not a
big
lot of
problem.
ways or time to do it over necessarily.
Yeah.
All right. In the context of retirement planning, what do you think, in your experience, is one area that many consumers overlook or don't give enough attention to?
I think the area that people overlook, and this is something that I used to coach advisors to when they were working with their clients, is the concept we used to coach to is called income diversification, having different streams of income in retirement, right?
Mhm.
What I've seen along the way is people go all in on one thing or another, right? And they either go all in on real estate and they're going to generate a ton of, they're going
Yeah.
to have 25 different rental properties and they're going to have all this income coming in and everything else, or these are exaggerations, but they have, all their money in their 401k and that's the only thing they have. And the reality is that the most successful people that I've seen in retirement are people that have diversified their sources of income. And just like you diversify your investments, where you don't put all your money in your company stock, you diversify, across the broad market and so on. You have to diversify sources of income because there are some key risks that you're going to face in retirement. We can go down that path if you want, but there are some key risks that you're going to face, and different investment vehicles, real estate versus assets in your 401k versus owning individual bonds and what have you, they behave differently depending on what the market is giving us and what the economic cycle is giving us. So if you have these different sources of income in retirement, it allows you to be a little more nimble, right? And
Mhm.
pull from different resources, and maybe one thing is a little bit more illiquid than another, and you have that flexibility. But secondarily, and I know this is a passion passion of yours, you can manage taxes much better that way, right? Like, do I have money in my Roth IRA versus my traditional IRA? And we have income coming in from real estate, or maybe I have a pension, and you have all these different levers you can pull in retirement. The most successful people that I've worked with in my almost 20 years of doing this have done that.
Yeah, there's value in that optionality and the ability to hedge, like from a tax perspective, having different accounts of different taxability status, regardless what the future holds of taxes and tax legislation. You have some choices, you have some control over how your money is taxed, depending where it comes from, what account type. And
Mhm.
so, to your point, I guess that applies across lots of things, not just account type, but asset type and income stream type. So, well said. Now, flip side of that, what do you think is an area people, or maybe even advisors, in your experience, give too much attention to with regards to retirement planning?
I I don't know if this has just been recently in the last few years or something, but I feel like it's kind of the new shiny object thing,
Yeah.
right? And you probably see this on in your world as well, and with the clients you work with. There's always something, right? There's people were asking about NFTs, right? And I just had this conversation with somebody the other day about getting back into crypto, and people are just chasing all this stuff, and a lot of times it can be a fool's game. And I think there are a lot of sometimes advisors fall into that trap as well, where they feel like they need to be the new shiny thing for people, right? When at the end of the day, plain vanilla, boring asset allocation, managed risk portfolios, managed cost portfolios are probably going to get the job done.
Yeah. I struggle with that as well. I don't have too short of an attention span or too much of a, distraction by shiny objects. And I'm firmly in the camp that keep it simple, don't overcomplicate it, control what you can, costs, taxation to some extent, diversity, etc. But I don't want to completely write off the new thing because all things that eventually become the good thing, the staple, start off as some new thing, right? So I'm always in the back of my mind like, oh, maybe crypto is something. I mean, that's a bad example because I don't think, whatever, I won't get into my opinions here on that. But, I do try to give some consideration to most shiny objects just to see, is there something here potentially, or is it just the new flash in the pan is going to be gone in a couple of years? And I don't know, I kind of, mixed feelings about how much credibility to give the latest and greatest that pop up from, from the Wall Street or insurance machines that are always looking to sell
Yeah.
the new thing.
My feeling is if you can explain it to me, I'll let you invest in it.
Good point. Yeah.
Right. And like, if you tell me, I don't, it's your money. You're the boss. I'm just here to help you walk through the risks and the rewards of this and try to figure out how it's going to fit into your financial plan. But don't go telling me that like, oh, well, Bitcoin is this on the blockchain and all sorts of like, and then like, you can't explain it to me because I can't explain it. Right.
Right.
So why invest? If you can explain it to me, no problem. If it makes sense for you, then let's have it. I don't have a bias one way or another. I just want to make sure you know what you own
Right. And
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 why
what's its purpose? Why do you want it? I've seen
and
not
why.
just clients, but like other public forums, Facebook group or whatever, people say, should I buy this or should I buy that? And my response would be like, well, why? What do you want it to solve for you that's not
Yeah.
already solved equally or better by something else? And oftentimes it's like, oh, I don't really know. It's just, I don't know. I saw someone talk about it, like prescription drugs on TV, like ask your doctor if so and so is right for you. Like, well, what's that mean, right? Like, you should start with the problem, then figure out the solution, as opposed to sell a solution in search of a problem.
Because nine times out of ten, the side effects are going to be worse
Oh
than
yeah,
the
right.
problem.
Yeah, financial products probably no different, right? All right, so planning for single people versus couples, and maybe this is, I don't know if there's a slick way to tie in divorce angles here, but what are some noteworthy differences you see or you've dealt with in retirement planning for single people versus couples?
I think the one thing that I see is that and this is definitely something that's lacking with a lot of couples that I work with, but definitely more with the single couples, and even on the divorce side, where once the divorce is settled and now somebody is newly single, this is a challenge, and it's the lack of an actual estate plan.
Mm,
Most people are flying by the seat of the pants when it comes to this stuff because it's boring. It's morbid to think about. They don't want to have to ask their family members, to be a trustee on their trust because it's kind of a weird conversation. It's complex, it's complicated, and I see this happen a ton, especially with the single, because they if you're listening and you're on the younger end of the spectrum and you're 25, 30 years old and so on, and you're still single, um, mommy and daddy can't speak on your behalf any longer.
Yep.
Okay. So if something happens to you and there's an accident and you're laid up in the hospital, you can't speak for yourself, you can't pay your bills, those types of things. It's not even due to death. I mean, that some of the stuff comes into play. It's unfortunate accidents, right? And I see so many people just completely ignoring this stuff. And I think you're doing yourself and your loved ones a disservice if you're not paying attention to this stuff. And again, this falls on, more couples have the stuff in place because there's more, like, we have more at stake. We have some kids and we have a home now and all these things.
Yeah.
So they've thought a little bit about this, but if I had like percentage wise, it's not that much of a higher of a percentage than single folks.
So I assume you deal with this in working with people who have gone through or are going through divorce. When two becomes one, whatever estate plans, legal documents they had, wills, power of attorneys, et cetera, I assume often need to get or should get changed at that point. Is that something you bring up, and do you work with, like, it may be a tender time in their lives, they don't want to face it or deal with it. Like, how do you help people kind of prod them along, like, this has to get done, but do it in a kind, caring, supportive way?
We use a digital estate planning resource that is, again, another big name company that's out there. We don't have to put a commercial out for, but we've been using this company for the last couple of years, and I think it makes it a little bit easier for people to understand the process. It literally will walk them through it, right?
Okay.
Like, they don't have to go make an appointment with an attorney. They can if they want, and maybe some cases where it's a little more complex and complicated, they should definitely speak with an attorney face to face who can really customize their estate plan. But for the rest of us, that it's pretty straightforward. These digital offerings that are available now, I mean, obviously buyer beware, but you can usually get through it. And I think what I do personally is, if you were my client, I would send you the link to the website, have you log in, because we do all this virtually now. It's 100% virtual. You would share your screen with me, and I would just walk you through the steps, and I will literally be there to hold your hand the entire time and be there to answer questions, because some of it, you can have some questions on some of these things. It'll give you an opportunity to go back and think of, you don't have to finish it all in one sitting either. Maybe we'll get through a couple different sections, and then you want to take some time to discuss some things with your loved ones or think things over. You can come pick it up and come back to it later. It really doesn't have to be this morbid, cumbersome, laborious process. And I think being there to hold their hand through it has been super helpful.
Yeah. I see that as well. Some people, I guess it's just your comfort level of thinking about and talking about uncomfortable things like mortality and inevitabilities. And some clients just don't want to, whatever. They know they should, but just, keep put it off, put it off, put it off. Others, they're all in. Like my mom is one of the most sort of out there, acknowledges, very on top of stuff. She's well aware all the stuff is important, needs to get done. I think I said this before to people listening, that she has this book where anytime she travels, she's from California, lived in New Jersey most of her adult life. So she'd go back a lot. She'd leave this big binder on her kitchen table of, like, stuff you should know if I'm gone, with everything my brother and I would need to know about her. So she's very comfortable talking about it. And I think that's where I get it from. And I'm very comfortable talking about the uncomfortable. But other folks, it's just such a struggle for them. And it's hard to know how much do you push them and try to coax them along versus, like, they're just not ready, even though we know it's something that needs to be done. So
Yeah, I mean, we have to
it's
move at
hard.
their speed, right? We have to move
Yeah.
at their speed, and you read the room, right? You have to read the room. But I think once people get through that process, that they realize that it wasn't that bad, right? And I
Yeah.
appreciate Mom's Book of Death. We send out a Book of Death as a Christmas gift for all of our clients every year that go through the estate planning process with us. So everybody gets a Book of Death where you can put all your important documents, just like Andy's mom.
Right.
And we have a lot of clients that have the Book of Death now, but it's important.
Great. Yeah. And if you could make it somewhat lighthearted, like calling it Book of Death, I mean, some people maybe rub the wrong way by it, but if you sort of like desensitize and I don't know what the word is, but like take away the stigma from it by talking about it in kind of lighthearted fashion, maybe that helps with some people. I don't know,
Yeah, yeah.
but so I tell myself. Okay, now these questions, that the transition from one to another is sometimes clunky because some of these questions were crowdsourced from the Facebook group, and I kind of had to jam them in somewhere in the flow here. But
Yep.
do you think some people, many people, all people could or should do their own retirement planning?
I can certainly change my own oil, right? I can mow my own lawn and I can trim my trees and everything else, but there are people out there that are better qualified to do it, who can do it more effectively and efficiently at a lower cost. So that's why I leverage other professionals. And I think if you're even as financial planners, you know this. I mean, there's financial planners for financial planners
Right.
that have that niche that's out there, and there's a reason why. Because we recognize, being in the business and and all the things that can go wrong, why there's a need for this. The challenge that I think we run into, and this is something that you've done an amazing job of, I just watching from afar, is providing real value with an intangible thing, right? And so that's where I think people well, long gone are the days where we're going to provide a 150-page financial plan to people to just like stock on their, like, sit on their
Right.
shelf and dust, right? So the work we do, a lot of the work we do is intangible. So the people that are out there that are trying to do this on their own, maybe they don't recognize that real value in there. You and I are in the trenches, so we see this every day, and we see the experiences our clients have, and where they would be if they didn't work with us to where they are now. So I think if people are doing this on their own, they're really missing the boat. Obviously, I'm biased, but I mean, there are so many studies out there. The Vanguard, white paper that's out there is an amazing, the Advisor Alpha study that's
Mhm.
out there. I would, from the cheapest company on the planet, who's saying you should pay for an advisor, there's a reason why the information is out there and why they go back to that study every year and update it every year. So
Yeah.
I think there's some real value there.
And now for people that do decide hiring an advisor is right for them. Now, as you know, there's different types of relationships. There's hourly only, there's like a one-time plan only, there's full ongoing and what have you. What are some questions people should ask, things they should look for when searching for and, interviewing or diligencing potential advisors?
You've probably had all the standard questions, provided to you, and because I know you asked this question of a lot of the advisors that come on. I think one resource that people don't use that they should be using, and is a good place to start, is in FINRA's broker check, right? So the financial regulatory authority that has oversight of all of over us, that has information on our background and experience on their website, which is like our permanent record, the permanent
Yep.
record that your parents told you had in high school, in middle school, that you didn't really have. Um, but this is our permanent record. And I think if you're exploring working with an advisor, that would be a good first place to start. FINRA broker check, put in the advisor's first name, last name. You're going to get it. You're going to know right away whether there are any disclosures, there's any lawsuits against them, anything that would be a red flag for you. And that's a very easy way, because let's face it, I mean, if you're having a 30-minute interview consultation with 3 or 4 advisors, that's a little bit of a time suck. You
Right.
can probably avoid having to waste any time with people that aren't going to be a fit for you if you start there. Um, but and I think really it all comes down to experience, and really, this is a people business that we're in. And if you're going to be working with somebody as your advisor for the next year or 2 or 5, you want to make sure there's a personality fit there too. So,
Right.
that's it. You have to really get to know the person as a person.
Yeah. I'm big on that. That intangible, sort of hard to put your finger on, but you know it when you see it, fit.
Yeah.
I don't want to work with people I don't feel we're a good fit, and I want to believe clients don't want to work with an advisor where they're not a good fit. Maybe some do, maybe some clients are just so, I don't know, price sensitive. Maybe they'll just simply take the lowest cost advisor they can find, and that relationship's doomed from the start, I would say. But for the most part, I want to think the fit, the je ne sais quoi, is really important. That's the most French I know, actually. And I don't even know if I said it right, but whatever. I Very important. So I'm glad you brought that up. I don't think many people have brought up sort of, the fit, which again is hard to
Yeah.
pinpoint, but you know when you come across it.
And to piggyback on what you just said there, there's a reason why if it's a cost thing, if you're looking at solely cost, I worked for a company that would have been called, was considered at one point a discount broker, right? And and it was everything they did was how can we do everything on the cheap and
Hmm.
provide this thing to everybody for free and that thing for everybody for free and so on. And then what the client experience was like every 2 years they got a new financial advisor whether they liked it or not because there was such turnover in that environment. They were meeting with people like one day you'd wake up and you're like your advisor's gone and now he's working at Home Depot,
Yeah.
right? And because it's not a sustainable environment, and because of the cost issue. So if that's the experience you want, then you have to know what you're going to be getting yourself into, and that was I witnessed it firsthand.
Right. Yeah. I believe definitely people shouldn't shop purely on cost. Not for this, not for financial advice. I do feel you get what you pay for, and going after an advisor purely because you're the lowest cost. That's unless you're going eyes wide open, the kind of experience you're going to have, and likely the quality of advice you're going to get. If that's okay by you, then so be it. But otherwise, that's probably not the best way to find an advisor.
Yeah.
So where do you go? You're a knowledgeable dude. Um, where do you go to learn more or stay on top of trends and changes in retirement planning world? Blogs, podcasts, YouTube channels, books, I don't know, whatever. And I guess more recently with the divorce thing, that's you said in the last couple of years you kind of started focus on that.
Yeah, I am definitely a visual learner, and I learn by having conversations like this. I learn by brainstorming ideas with peers and colleagues that work for me and work with me. I love the going to conferences just for the energy and being able to absorb the information. That's how I get my information. And obviously, I'm turning here because my TV's to my left, but CNBC's on most of the day, so I can keep up with. If people have questions, I can speak relatively eloquent about what's going on, what I've seen, and those types of things. But luckily, that happens very rarely these days because most people have information at the ready as well. But that's how I've never been one to sit and like kudos to the people that can read 300 books a year. That is not me,
Yeah.
right? It's never been. I don't know. I must have some level of ADHD or something. There's something underlying there, but and that was probably why I wasn't great in school either until I got a little bit older and I matured and I there was more of the interaction with other colleagues and collaboration, that type of thing. But that's how I get my information and I learn on a daily basis. And with the divorce stuff, it is relatively new to me. I've only been doing it for a couple of years now. I have some personal experience, unfortunately, for like the last 7, but so I've learned a lot in that experience as well. But on the divorce side, I'm just trying to absorb as much as I possibly can with networking groups and different conferences that I can be a part of to really try to immerse myself in it and absorb the information.
And it's great in this industry. There's sort of sub groups or networks of people for any kind of focus or specialization you're interested in, right? Like divorce. I don't follow that subcategory closely, but I assume there's conferences specifically for that. I know there's a professional designation specifically for that. So like you can find your tribe and people to learn from and connect with, regardless of what you're looking to find, right? In the
Absolutely.
advisory world.
There's a divorce professionals networking group. There's a certified divorce financial planner, which I am. There's a training group. There's a gal that she's kind of the face of the franchise, so to speak, of divorce financial planners, and she coaches divorce financial planners across the country. There is the IDFA, which is the Institute for Divorce Financial Analysts. I'm a member of that group, and they have a conference every year. Then they have some. Uh, I wouldn't say breakout conferences like some of these others where they do them in small different pockets across the country, but there's monthly conference calls. There's all kinds of training that goes along with that, and that's where I've been absorbing that
Yeah,
as much info as I can from that world.
great. And I'm with you, just side note, I struggle to read books as much as I want to, and I want to say I'm a reader. I want to be a reader. I just can't. Even if it's a great book, I struggle to get through it. Like sitting still and putting eyes on
Mhm.
paper. Just I maybe it's ADHD. I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm with it.
I've really struggled with that probably my entire life.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sidebar. So next block of questions, we started talking about fit before, and that's important for advisor and client alike. How do you know, and the people you work with and potential clients you talk with, how do you know if someone's going to be a good fit for you as opposed to like you being a good fit for them?
I think you've got to read the room, right? And I think we've done a pretty good job of that because we don't get this far in our careers without being able to talk to people and connect with people. So I think there's that place to start. I always say, like, I'm at the stage in my career where I want to work with people that I want to go out and have a beer with.
Right.
I don't want to. If you're a problem child, you're not a fit.
Yeah.
And because at this stage of my life, not that I'm not ultra wealthy, I'm not LeBron James here. That's not what I'm trying to say.
Mhm.
But I don't, the $5,000 a year you're going to pay me, whatever the number is really not going to change my life. So I can just go find somebody else who wants to work, is going to be more of a fit. But then secondarily, we want to work with people that are willing to take the advice and act on it.
Mhm.
There's nothing worse than spending time with people and walking them through the process because the financial planning process, we try to follow it to the like the CFP board has taught us, right? There's steps along the way, milestones along the way we try to get people through. And if we do all that work and we spend all this time with you, which could be take 2 or 3 months to really build out the foundation of your financial plan, and then you're not willing to actually act on it and take the advice, and what are we doing here? Why would we even want to do that dance?
Yeah.
So I think those are the two things that I try to pick up on, because we're not here to take anybody's money either. That's just not me.
Yeah. And I like it's common bond across everyone I try to have in my circle and be in their circles is the smaller, intentionally smaller advisory firms where fit does matter. There's intentionally a limited number of people you want to work with. So every seat you fill on your bus matters. And you want to be people that you enjoy talking to. It's not like your old firm or many advisors listening work for really large places where it's all just production driven. Like anyone with
Mm-hmm.
a pulse is a good client, no matter how much you're not a fit or how much you despise when they call. Small firms have the discretion and flexibility and intention to make sure relationships fit because they're not super money hungry for the next however many thousands of dollars of revenue, and it's more important to build out the right practice and right relationships. So
Yeah.
but anyway, I'm glad you said that, and it's it means a lot, and for clients it should as well to know your advisor truly wants to work with you and is just putting up with you because some boss says they have to.
Exactly.
Inevitably, not all relationships work out, leading to the next question. Have you ever had to voluntarily part ways with a client and why? Now, this is your current firm, not the big place before.
Yeah. I think I've had to fire 3 clients since we got started 4.5, almost 5 years ago now. So a couple of them were just, kind of like I mentioned just a second ago, they weren't taking the advice, they weren't acting on it. We're just spinning our wheels. And then, there might have been a question like, okay, like what am I paying you for type of thing? And my response was probably, I have no clue because you're not willing to take any of the advice I give you anyway. So we should
Right.
probably just go in different directions. Um, and then there was one client, I think there's been one client so far where we worked with her for about a year and a half, and she's just in a good spot. She's like young kid. I'm going to say kid because she's under the age of 40,
Mhm.
and in a really good spot. And there really wasn't a need for her to continue paying for the service that we provide because we do a subscription based model where they're paying us on a monthly basis. And I just kind of like, all right, you've maybe not necessarily outgrown, but come to a point where we can maybe pick this up in a couple of years. If something changes, you decide to have a family and things get a little more complex. But for right now, we're not here to take anybody's money. There's no reason for people to be on the bus, just going along for the ride and not actively, and we're not actively helping them make progress towards something.
Yeah.
That was an easy one, but a couple of the others were a little more difficult just because they weren't playing ball, so to speak.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, my feeling is clients and employees fire themselves eventually, and we just have to have that conversation and let them go on.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Now, have you, again, divorce being the relatively new focus in your efforts, have you had clients go through a divorce from the time they started working with you to present, or have you had people who were going through a divorce then reach out to you because they found you because they wanted someone with, divorce specific knowledge and expertise?
On the traditional retirement planning side,
Yeah.
or with divorce
Yeah,
in
retirement
general.
planning.
Um, well, unfortunately, as you know, about 50% of our clients are going to experience divorce. At least married couples are going to experience divorce at some phase of their life. So along the way, we've definitely had to deal with that. Which is why, primarily I wanted to get this designation almost 10 years ago now,
Yeah.
and work towards that. But I was told I couldn't at that time. But
Could we just pause there for a second? So again, we don't
yeah,
want to name your former employer, but um, big place everyone's heard of. They did not, or they discouraged you getting additional education and credentials,
they
correct? So I
did.
just want to
Yeah.
backtrack on
Yeah.
what you said there. So you
Yeah,
wanted to
it
get
was a little
additional, yeah.
bit. Yeah, and I of course won't name the name, but it was a little bit more of like, hey, listen, you got 450 clients. We don't really do that work here. We don't want to get bogged down in it because it's time consuming. It's also very emotional. It's time consuming work, and we just have some more quotas to hit. So go make some more. Go back to your office, enjoy the free coffee, and go make some more phone calls, kid.
Right.
And I listened to them, and then sure enough, a couple of years after that, I went through my own divorce and wish I would have had the experience and the know-how at that point. But I digress. But I think we do have a lot of clients that do experience it, and the only challenge that I have now, which is unique to my particular situation, is to because of Woodson Wealth Management, my RIA, my wealth management company, is fee only, like a lot of the advisors that you've had on here and yourself. We have to avoid the conflicts of interest, right? And we have to do that at all cost. So I can't help if I'm working with a husband and wife and they go through a divorce, I can't help them on the other side, right? If somebody comes to me by way of divorce through Allegiant and they decide to work with me after the divorce is finalized because maybe there's a settlement coming their way or they have to divide up retirement accounts, what have you, I can then help them in that at Woodson. They have to sign a disclosure letting to that effect, but the unfortunate challenge that I run into now is I would have to refer them to another CDFA like myself if we
Mhm.
have a husband and wife that are going through a divorce.
So can you just talk through again the difference between Woodson and Allegiant for folks listening, how the two companies are related or not related, what each one does at a high level?
Yeah, I mean, I call them sister companies. I don't know what the correct term is, but we did have to set up. I set up two different companies, two LLCs. Allegiant, the divorce planning company, wasn't in existence 5 years ago when I started Woodson, so that entity was already established. We do our wealth management, traditional retirement planning, all the stuff that you do, type of stuff, right? At Woodson, and then Allegiant Divorce Solutions is set up as a separate entity to do the divorce financial planning. So there we do very different work, very different work. We're layering in some financial planning, right? Like future cash flow projections and that type of thing. But we're also helping people run, child support calculations, alimony calculations, helping them create, like we're working with attorneys to help them figure out the financial aspects of the divorce and work through negotiations and maybe supporting them through mediation. There's any of the financial nuances of a divorce. We're doing that work at Allegiant.
Okay.
There's a reason why I mean, some legal reasons why, but another one is that there's no CDFA attorney client privilege, like there's attorney client privilege. So our books and records would be open to subpoena if we were brought into court and they wanted notes from a particular client or whatever, and they had access to our CRM there. I wanted to keep that separate. That way, our wealth management clients didn't have any issues with getting their information shared with the courts
Got it.
unnecessarily.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you're not managing investments through Allegiant Divorce Solutions. That's just sort of the planning around, I'm in the process of getting divorced or queuing up a divorce and need to know how to start thinking about the financial aspects of this. And then correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess that's sort of a limited engagement thing. Eventually, divorce will be finalized and kind of dust settles, and they're no longer Allegiant clients.
Exactly, exactly. There is a kind of a definitive end, a point in time when the engagement will end.
Okay.
It is. I don't know how deep you want to go with this. I'm happy to talk about it, and tell me to stop if it's too much. But the with Allegiant, we operate under a retainer model. Okay, so we take a retainer,
Okay.
just like we do, like an attorney would. We have a billable hour rate that we bill against, and we that's how we establish. That's how we get our fee for the work that we do there. And it's very similar to a financial planning engagement where we're going to gather the information from the client, right? They're going to send us all of their documents. And then for those of you that are listening that have gone through a divorce, one of the first things that you're going to do for the courts and your attorney is create financial affidavits. Every state calls them something differently. In New York, I think it's a client information sheet or something like that. Here in California, it's called the FL 150, which is your income and expense declarations. They're all basically the same, but every state calls them something different. So that's where we start. We'll build those out. So kind of like you and I would do in a retirement planning engagement, we would gather statements, or we'd have people, clients link their accounts, and we'd organize all that information. It's very similar. That's where we start with Allegiant. We'll start filling out those forms for them. We even have software that will allow us to print the affidavits for the client, and they can basically send them to the courts.
Mm, okay.
The software we use is admissible in courts in all 50 states. Most states have some state-specific form. Those that do not, we can just give them a generic affidavit and they can file those if necessary. But that's where we start. And then we're organizing the information. And then it's a matter of like, what are your goals and objectives? Like, what do you want to walk away with this divorce? What are your non-negotiables? What hill do you want to die on? What hill don't you want to die on? And we'll help them sort all that out. So there's definitely some goal setting, organizing the financials, and then it really changes when we start thinking about like, I've been here in my office where clients are on the other side, other side of the country in mediation, and we're just texting each other, trying to think through like, okay, well, you should ask for this thing. Like, okay, he's going to ask for that, then ask for this. Like, and it's very, very different.
Yeah. So do you, I guess you don't mediate, so you work, I don't even know if represents the right term, but you represent just one party of the two. You don't help mediate the two.
I am actually a certified mediator. I ended up getting certified in mediation last year, and so I've done a handful of mediation cases, which
Okay.
has been amazing. So I tell people all the time, there's two ways you can work with us. The first is in what we call an advocacy role. So if you're my client, I'm on Team Andy,
Okay.
right? I'm going to be there to support you, hold your hand, coach you through this exercise, help you make sure you're not going to step any financial landmines, and try to get you the most fair and equitable settlement at the end of the day. The other alternative is I can be there to mediate the case with you and your spouse and really help the two of you work it out together. The beauty of doing it that way is I will actually craft and draft a document called the Memorandum of Understanding, which in almost every state operates as the marital settlement agreement, the divorce decree, the whatever your state calls it. And you can take that document, file with the courts, and be divorced. Yeah. And some states will say, well, take that document and, fill out our forms and attach them to this and we'll stamp everything and it's done. Other states, sometimes different courts within the state will say, no, we'll take that information, but we need to put it in our legalese.
Yeah.
And then you can file that form, which is very redundant, which is why most states will accept that document. It's called a Memorandum of Understanding. We'll actually draft that document for clients and they can be on their way. But
Oh,
mediation only works, in my experience, and in talking to other colleagues that do this work, when two people are just like, you know what, I don't really like you anymore. I kind of want to just go in different direction, but I don't want to hurt you, and I want everything to be fair, and I want the kids to
yeah.
be okay, and so on. If it's contentious, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah. Which in a perfect world, it sounds like mediation would always be the way to go, but I can see how that's not gonna
Not when it
happen.
comes to money. Very difficult when it comes to money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that about those two. All right. So some technical-ish practice-specific things back to kind of general retirement planning.
Mhm.
What's your view and approach on investment management? Now, I know we can spend a whole hour just on this, but kind of high level, are you an active guy, a passive guy? You don't name specific securities, but types of things you normally invest in for folks?
Yeah, I mean, our demographic for the most part is, call it 30 to 50, 35 to 55. Most of the people we work with skew to the younger side of the spectrum. So they are all about passive, low cost index type of investing. And I've just seen it time and time again where that works. Layering in a little bit of active management of the portfolio, making some tilts one way or another and different sector bets, so to speak, and making some alterations to the portfolio. But for the most part, we are 100% passive investing, low cost, low fee drag, and we'll just keep it just super simple, easy for people to understand too.
Yeah.
Easy for people to understand. Yeah.
Now, with the passive approach, do you do any sort of formal benchmarking like, okay, client ABC, here's the returns of your portfolio at Woodson,
Mhm.
here's whatever benchmark, whether it's a major stock index or some customized benchmark. Do you do that and produce the comparison for clients?
We do. We use a company called Altruist for our portfolio management. A lot of your listeners and probably some of your our advisor friends use them as well. And we build the portfolio there. We can create a benchmark for the client and assign that benchmark to each client portfolio. And it's amazing because we can show like in real time with in conversations with clients, here's how we've compared, 1 month, 1 year, all time, or whatever it is, against the benchmark. So I'm a firm believer in benchmarks simply because we want to know how we're doing, and we want to make sure we're earning our keep. Complementary to that is we want to make sure that we're not if you're monitoring the benchmark, you can see whether or not you're over or under by a particular amount and how much
Right.
are you taking on enough risk or maybe not taking or maybe you're taking on too much risk, maybe not taking on enough, and it's a good barometer for us.
Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, annuities, I know your client base is a little younger than probably the typical roster of clients most folks on the show have, but what's your view and usage of annuities, if at all? With now, I know you don't have insurance licenses, so you don't sell them, but do you give guidance on or find cases where you recommend clients should have annuities for whatever the reasons are?
Yeah, I actually do have an insurance license.
Oh,
But
you do?
insurance
Okay. Sorry, I didn't
yeah,
know that.
yeah, California insurance license. We don't sell annuities anymore. Mainly because of the demographic that we're in. A lot of the clients that we work with are mostly in the accumulation phase, very few
Yeah.
retirees. But it goes back to the income diversification, right? Where we talked about at the outset. When I coached and trained advisors, this was one of those things that we talked about all the time, where annuities fit, where they don't fit into a client portfolio. So I'm a big subscriber to Wade Pfau and his work so those of you out there that want to learn more about this stuff, you should definitely check out this gentleman named Wade Pfau, Pfau. He's an amazing professor. I forget what school he taught at, but he has a lot of white papers on this stuff, and I had a lot of interest in this over the last 20 years or so. I believe in certain types of annuities, right?
Hmm.
Like there are certain annuities out there that I won't touch with a 10-foot pole, but there are definitely some annuities out there that would make sense. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, kind of, in the first half of the show, which is you have to know what you own and why and where it
Yeah.
fits in. And if it's a matter of, maintaining, recreating some kind of a pension income like stream for yourself, so you don't have to worry about what the stock market's doing, and that's your comfort level. Annuities are a great fit for stuff like that. They're not great for all the TikTok stuff that I see all the time, where it's like leverage this annuity for this, your retirement plan, or this, bankroll your annuity and do that. Like that stuff is most of that stuff is garbage. There's a reason why you own annuities, and it's not for half of the
Right.
majority of the reasons why you're seeing it on TikTok. If you are,
Yeah. Financial advice on TikTok should be taken with a grain of salt, typically.
absolutely.
Trusts. Now, specifically the living revocable trusts. I'm still trying to
Mhm.
make up my mind on this. Now, certain states I feel differently than other states, but if you were to sort of generalize your views on clients having sort of plain vanilla living revocable trusts, I know California, they're one of the more typical states to have it in, but more broadly speaking, do you think people generally should or shouldn't have or bother getting a living revocable trust? And for everyone listening, Jamie's not a lawyer, so we're not giving legal advice. Just as
Yeah,
an advisor, your views and opinions on it.
I skew to this to the side of the spectrum that says that if you have some assets in California, just for those of you listening, the rule of thumb here in California is if you have over $160,000 in assets, you should consider getting yourself a trust. I'm sure every state has different rules of thumb, but my feeling on it is it allows you to gain control of your assets from the grave. So if you, and especially if you have kids that are minor children, and you want to make sure that if something happens to you, you can take those kids are going to be taken care of, and there's somebody that's going to be responsible for them, and be able to establish a trust for them to be able to make sure that they don't squander the money and handle that over people. I'm a big fan of it. Some people would think maybe that that it's cost prohibitive or whatever. I think some of these services that are available now these days have kind of squandered that, but squashed that, I should say. But I'm a big fan of them for sure.
What's the 160,000 asset size in California? I know their probate expense is tiered based on probate asset size, right? Is that where it comes from, the
I
160?
think that's where it comes from. I know anything under $100,000 in the state of California is considered small probate,
Okay.
so it won't be dragged through a 3-year process like you know if you had $1 million in assets that didn't have beneficiaries or whatever associated with it. But I'm pretty sure I don't know specifically, but I'm pretty sure that's where it comes from as far as the cost goes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. All right. Long-term care insurance. This was another kind of common crowd question amongst retirees or people planning for retirement. What's your view and approach towards long-term care insurance? Does it make sense? Does it not? Is it situation dependent?
I think it's situation dependent, but what I've seen just in my experience, and yours may be different, but in my experience, there's two things. One, if you're considering it, you should probably jump on it sooner rather than later, because a lot of these companies are getting out of that business faster than they're getting into it. And secondarily, a lot of the clients that we work with can simply self-fund. That's when they get to that point in their life where they're starting to think about those things, and you know the kids are out of the house and they're self-sufficient, and they only have themselves to think about, and they've done a good job diligently saving over the years, and we have a financial plan in place, right? And I think that's where the financial planning comes in, because a lot of the software we use has long-term care modules in there. We can run some analysis on that to see if it makes sense, and that's usually where I start, is to figure out, like, is this something that we should even consider? Run the numbers, and then more times than not, self-funding is the way to go.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that your experience too?
It is. I mean, and that's a function of most of the folks I work with have enough assets relative to their expenses and stuff that self-funding is a pretty defensible approach.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all just a rule of thumb, but someone I know well in long-term care insurance who I like and trust, it's something along the lines of people with a lot of assets can self-fund. People with little assets, they probably can't afford traditional long-term care insurance. That their plan kind of needs to be, if they have a long-term care event, they're going to spend down their assets, let Medicaid kick in. It's the people in the middle level of assets where you really need to consider it more. Like, you have enough money that you could afford this without breaking your bank, afford the long-term care insurance, but not enough that you can easily self-fund, especially for a couple where, you know, the first of the couple may have a long-term care event and they'll spend down a lot of assets and even time and emotional energy of the other spouse caring for them. Then that spouse passes, the first one passes, and the remaining spouse now has to worry about what happens if they have a long-term care event and they already kind of used up a lot of their self-funding bucket. So, but yeah, my experience, just the nature of the clients I work with, is self-funding is usually the way to go. But I can see where there kind of will be cases where traditional long-term care insurance makes sense, though it is painful. I have some clients that have it, and the premium increases have been unfathomable in the last few years, and continuing to go up. So,
Cost prohibitive at some point.
yeah, and it makes it a tough decision. Like, the sunk cost. So I've had this policy for 10 years, premiums keep going up, do I keep just biting the bullet and paying more? Now, granted, they give you options to cut back coverage or reduce inflation or whatever to help moderate your premiums, but it's like you feel like you've been paying it for so long, you don't want to just, what do they call it, cut bait or walk away.
Yeah, yeah.
But at some level, it's like this is a lot of money to keep paying. I don't know. It's one thing I struggle with. What is the right approach? Again, my clients, it seems to make sense to do self-funding, but where are there cases where it's a little more questionable? It's like I do kind of just lay out for clients. These are the pros, these are the cons. Here's where it can make sense, here where it can't. I don't have a black and white answer of this is a slam dunk to do or not do. Here's just kind of the considerations you need to have in mind in making the decision. So, all right, distribution planning. So for clients who are in the distribution stage of life, and this was a crowdsourced question, and there's lots of different ways to distribute a portfolio. Do you have any sort of standard approach or process to putting in place a distribution plan for someone?
Yeah, we used to. There's a matrix that I create, and do you ever hear of a gentleman named Ray Lucia? Do you ever hear that name, Ray Lucia?
I don't believe so.
He's probably disbarred from the financial services industry at this stage of the game, but he was a guy who had an AM radio station here in Southern California, and he was probably nationally syndicated. This guy, Ray Lucia, and he created the buckets of money strategy. It was the buckets of money, Andy.
Sounds good.
And it was financial planning 101, right? It was, and so we create what I usually whiteboard this for clients, but we create, 3 columns, right? We look at like, what are your emergency, like you have your emergency cash available on hand, right? You have your protection type of assets in the middle, emergency protection, and then growth with the 3 columns, right? And one of the first exercises I'll take people through that are in the distribution phase is walking them through that. Like, okay, like 12 months worth of expenses. How much money do we need from year 0 to 1 in that emergency cash position, right? Like, because if the markets go sideways, we don't want to have to sell out of the growth portfolio. We want to make sure we give that time to rebound and come back before we replenish the emergency reserve. So we figure out what that number is. And it's just an exercise of letting them figure out like, okay, like how much money do I need to have in each of these buckets of money, so to speak, in order to have a successful outcome? So if you have, maybe you have $1 million saved up, maybe you have $100,000 in the emergency, you have $300,000 or so, what we call a protection component, and then, the other $600,000 in growth. And the way that we look at that from a visual perspective is, okay, we have 0 to 1 year, we have 1 to 3 years, and then we have, 3 years and beyond. And then what we're looking at is like, okay, like what do we want to protect against? Are we protecting against inflation? Are we protecting against your longevity? Are we protecting against, the market? Do we need to have flexibility? The acronym I use is called FILM. It was, something that the big name firm I worked with, taught us, and then I coached other advisors too. And I still use today. It's called FILM. So it's, you're managing against the main risks in retirement are making sure you have enough flexibility because you don't want to have everything that's a liquid and you can't get to it if you need it. You need to have an inflation hedge. You need to make sure you're not going to outlive the money, longevity, and then you need to protect against the market. And if you can manage all those things by using different, I was going to say products, but that's probably not the right word to use, but different solutions for each of those particular categories. So you have, and then this is much easier in a matrix, so play along. But when people can visualize all this and we can show them, okay, we're going to have a little bit of money in stocks over here. We have some money in bonds, which is your protection component, right? Or we have annuities, which is another protection solution. We have, high yield savings over here. Now we've got all of our bases covered. If the market goes to hell, we don't have to worry about it because we have cash we can pull from. And then maybe at that time, the protection piece goes up because the bonds will react positively to the market pulling back. Usually, depending on the economic cycle, we can maybe pull a little bit of money out of the bond part of the portfolio and move that to the growth side. So we can ensure that at the end of the day, we're rebalancing across all of these different components and we're protecting you against these 4 major factors we've factored in. And that's effectively how I've approached it. So very difficult to explain without whiteboarding it and doing it in this format. But it's a combination of what risks are we really trying to protect you against? What solutions do we have to do that with? And how do we want to allocate your resources across? all of them.
I like the film thing. That's a good one. I wish I can
The
get
other one
creative
is
and come up with
The
more
other
good
one
ones.
is Wilma. Wilma.
Ooh, what's that stand for? Do tell.
Wilma stands for withdrawal rate. So there's some other risks that people that are in retirement face, right? That kind of jibe with what I just mentioned. So withdrawal rates, you want to make sure that your withdrawal rates are manageable. If you're withdrawing too much money from your portfolio every month or every year, you're probably not going to be able to sustain right things. You have inflation. We already talked about that. Longevity, the market risk, and then asset allocation is really the division of like how much risk do I have in this portfolio, because that can come back to haunt you as well. So
Hmm.
it just depends on which acronym I want to pull out and how I want to who I'm coaching and who
N-
I'm talking to.
Now it'd be much cooler if instead of film and Wilma, it was Fred and Wilma. And as you were talking, I was trying to think of ways to repurpose film into Fred. I couldn't quite get there. F can still be what'd you say F was? Whatever. F is F.
Flexibility. F is flexibility.
Flexibility.
Mhm.
R can be rate of return. That can replace M for market. E could be, I thought I had something brilliant here. No, whatever. I'm gonna waste time on this, but I almost had Fred figured out to replace film. So
Well,
that maybe Fred
if you
Wilma.
have it figured out, let me know. We'll trademark it and then we'll sell
Uh,
it to the big firm for coaching
awesome.
purposes.
Yeah. So we'll have to do something Jetsons themed too, along with the Flintstones. But all right, tax planning. It's one of my faves.
Yep.
Any or what common tax planning opportunities do you come across with clients? And I'm just curious, not to put you on the spot, is there anything like divorce specific as well that could lead to some sort of tax planning opportunity or not?
With divorce, there's a lot of tax planning that comes into play. Um, we could probably do a whole show on it. To be honest, I mean, there's a lot
Mhm.
here, but I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. You have things like, how are you going to file your tax returns?
Right.
Are
Okay.
you going to, if you're going to be, if you're still married by the end of the year because the divorce isn't finalized, is he filing separate? Am I filing separate? Am I head of household now? Who's going to get the deductions for the kids? Who's going to get who's going to be able to claim the kids on the tax return? That is one that comes up all the time. Previously, we don't have to worry about this anymore, but the taxability or the tax deduction that goes along with alimony, that still comes up in some of the divorces that um, maybe we're doing like post-divorce planning for them and the things
Mm.
that have come up. They've divorced 5 years ago, and now something else has come up, and we have to help them with that. But one of the things that, and if there are any attorneys listening that do divorce work, family law, so I'm going to apologize for saying this and calling you out on this, but a lot of them don't understand the after-tax valuation of assets. They all think that $500,000 in my home equity, in the home equity that we have, and $500,000 that's in my 401k or my IRA are equal. They have no clue how taxes impact the division of assets in divorce. And it's one of the things that we talk about all the time. And even with pension plans, I'm sure probably some of the listeners that we are listening today maybe have pensions because they're government employees or former military, or they're one of the dying breed that has a pension from their large company. There's taxes that are associated with that we have to figure out. We have to figure out what the value of the pension is, because it's not just $2,000 a month that you're getting. We have to actually put a real value on that. Then we have to figure out what the after-tax value is of that, and that comes up all the time. And then, kind of jibing with your original question and the divorce, we do work with a lot of younger folks, and a lot of them work in the technology. And how are they compensated? Incentive stock options, RSUs, PSUs, and like all of it, all of the executive comp stuff that can make your head spin. And there's so many tax issues and a ton of tax planning that has to go around that. Like, and in divorce, it's like, well, is it vested yet? Is it not
Mm.
vested? When
Wow,
will it vest? All the stuff.
that's a bird's nest.
Yeah.
Now, I heard one of your episodes in your podcast a couple months ago, maybe you talked about the equitable division of assets and how tax has to play in. And you mentioned how a lot of lawyers just view stuff on face value. But to your point, a $500,000 IRA is not the same as a $500,000 Roth IRA. If one person's got an all-in 30% tax bracket, like that just shaves a third off the IRA compared to the Roth. So
Hmm.
now, do courts get it though? Like when you work with people to work on an equitable distribution that accounts for net of tax values, or courts like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and they'll approve it, versus if a lawyer does it and they just split stuff 50-50 on face value, does the court not even think to ask, what about tax considerations?
My experience with courts is if the judge looks at a document and two parties have signed it and they've agreed to it, and it isn't too far out of whack, they're probably not going to ask the question.
Okay.
And that's where, and it's just by the nature of the court system. They're too busy. There's too much going on. They don't have the time. How quickly can I get you out of my courtroom? Oh, you've already agreed to this? Seems Seems reasonable.
Right.
Stamp, move on. Congratulations, you're divorced. And then, but so where we come in is that going back to my conversation earlier about organizing that information. Once we get all your statements and your tax returns and all the stuff, we can put that in our the software we use because we don't do this on the back of a napkin. We actually use technology for this, and we can show you like, okay, like here's your side of the ledger, here's the other, your spouse's side of the ledger, and this is what the marital component of this is on an after-tax basis. How do we want to divide this up? And we can literally show, like I can show, like, she's going to take 100% of this account, he's going to take 100% of that account, and in real time it's going to give us the percentages.
Hmm.
That way we can get
Okay.
closer to 50-50. It's pretty incredible.
Oh, very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Neat stuff there. Um, Now, broader sort of question, but a lot of financial planning, whether divorce related or not, there's lots of nitty-gritty and details that need to be taken into account. And a lot of clients just want to know, am I okay, or whatever, or tell me what I need to do to be okay. So how do you try to balance you as the advisor needing to know and understand to make sure the details and nitty-gritty are there, but not overcomplicate it in the delivery and presentation to clients so they can digest it?
I've been asking this question in recently, and I probably should have asked it for the first 20, the first 19 years of my career or 18 years of my career. But in the last year, I've been asking this question, and it's, how do you absorb information best? Are you an auditory learner? Are you a visual learner? Should I, like, how, like, tell me how I can get you this information best? And it's a game changer. So many people, because I was always one of those where if you came into even in prospect meetings with prospective clients, oh, let me show you our website and walk you through our process and the whole thing. And I never really thought to ask the person that question because they may not be a visual learner.
Hmm.
But by asking that question, it helps me craft the delivery of the end of the explanation. Like, oh, you want a visual? Great. Let me show you this report to show you how this is all going to work and this is all going to go down. And or maybe it's that, maybe not even in divorce, on the divorce side, on the traditional retirement planning side, maybe it's well, let me bring up Right Capital or eMoney and I'll show you your plan projections just so you know that we have all of this stuff figured out. And here's where we are today. This is where we were. This is where we are today, and this is where we think we're headed. How does that make you feel? And I think just asking those questions, because if somebody's an auditory learner and they prefer to verbalize, like have verbal conversations about this, it's like, all right, I don't need to show you any stuff. Just tell me, what are you feeling? Right? Like, is this really a question about, am I going to be okay, or did something else happen that brought this question up that we need to dive a little bit deeper into? And I think that goes across both types of companies that I run.
Yeah.
Just asking that question.
That makes so much sense. It's almost too much sense. Never thought about it, to your point, right? You just started doing it last year, and looking back now, it's something that obviously could have and should have brought up for the last 20 years, but that's a good one. Maybe I'll start doing that. Thank you for that.
And the one thing I've been doing, and I know you didn't ask this question, but I'm leading every conversation with, "Hey, Andy, thanks for carving out some time to chat. What's on your mind?" And then I STFU. I don't say another word until they answer the question.
Yeah.
And that has been game changer for me. Game changer.
I'm just curious, have you had anyone like not say anything for like 3 minutes and you're just sitting there kind of twiddling your thumbs waiting, or hasn't
No,
happened?
eight
No.
seconds. 8 seconds is usually how long I'll just sit. Like, first one to speak loses, right? So I'll
Yeah.
just and I think it's usually like 8 or 10 seconds max. most people it's here's where I'm at. This is what I'm thinking. This is what we got going on. And it just allows them to just, because I was always one about, here's my agenda, and here's what I want to talk about today. Here are the five
Right.
things we should be talking. And finally, I'm just like, I'm like post-it notes now. I'm like, here are the five things that I could probably talk to this client about, but let me see what's on their agenda first. And it's changed. I think it's changed my experience as well as theirs because there's less pressure on me now.
Right. Yeah. I get it. That's a neat one. Sort of related, not really, I guess, but in college I had a philosophy class that I absolutely bombed. It was my least favorite class, and I did not do well in it. But the one thing that struck me was the teacher. Now, this is maybe him playing some like philosophy games in my head, but in the class, instead of saying to the class, like, let me know if you have any questions after he explained something, he'd say, what questions do you have for me?
Hmm.
And something about that made me more willing to ask questions, and it seems like other students as well. And that little reframing and choice of words he used, and so it sort of like put it on the students and gave them permission and made them more comfortable to ask
Hmm.
questions, as opposed to saying what questions you have. It's or no, I'm sorry. Well, let me know if you have questions. What questions do you have? I know it's
Hmm.
not the same as what you just said, but sort of got me thinking, kind of along the same lines. Like put it on them, make it open the door, let them know. Okay, it's now your time. You have the mic, so to
Hmm.
speak,
Yeah.
and I think that that matters. So
Yeah, and I've tried to. I know this is not the topic of our conversation, but I think it's just and so maybe some other advisors that are listening that struggle with this stuff. This hopefully will help. But I asked the same question in my podcast, which you're going to start hearing over the last few episodes that I've done. Thank you for subscribing to and supporting me there. But one of the last is like, hey, this is the carte blanche section segment of our podcast. What questions should I have asked that I didn't ask? Because there's always something.
right.
And then because I'm always like, I think I know what I should be asking or else, and it gives the guest an opportunity to say like, oh, well, wait, hey, I thought we were going to talk about this, and it gives them the permission to bring it up as well.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you that at the end. So put it back on you. So I hope you have something to say. Um, all right. So the enough, do I have enough question is quite common, and
Mhm.
probably the main question for a lot of clients is, do I have enough? How do you help clients determine if they have quote unquote enough for retirement?
It's a question that people get asked a lot. I think like, what is my number,
Yeah.
right? How I usually answer that question is, how much do you want to leave the kids or your loved ones, right? Because this, you run the client scenario through eMoney or Right Capital or whatever software you use, and so many of them are like 2 million, 5 million, $10 million at the end of the plan. Like, do you really want to live your life like that? Like, do you want to give your kids $10 million? You told me you didn't even like them. Like, little Johnny is like like he's just barely getting by, and he's 29 years old, and you have this thing going on with your daughter or whatever it is. Like, do you really want to give them that kind of money? So I try to put it back on them. Like, okay, like how much do you want to leave your kids? And then if the answer is I don't want to leave them anything, then we can back into the like, okay, well, you kind of have enough at this point, and here's why,
Mhm.
right? Like, based on the income that you have, the expenses that you have, and the savings that you have at this point, how well, whatever the goals, objectives you have, whatever it is, here's how we can make I think that's the easiest way to go about doing it, because you can't take it with you,
No.
and only you as the client can really answer the question like, how much is enough? Like, as far as I'm concerned, I want my funeral home check to bounce.
Right.
Like, that's me. I don't need to leave a legacy. I'm not LeBron James. I don't need to like statue at my alma mater or any of those things. Like, that's just it. Kids, you got to like work. I had to work. You have to work. It's just my philosophy. Not
Yeah.
everybody's like that though. So for
That dollar
me,
zero
enough would be,
concept. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, zero concept.
Okay. Now, for clients that do have enough, and these are people, I guess in retirement, clients that do have enough but struggle to get over the hurdle of needing to switch from accumulating and saving to now decumulating and spending. Part of our roles are almost like therapists and behavioralists, not behavioralists, but whatever. How do you help people manage that? You have enough, let's get over that hump and hurdle of not being able to spend it.
Hmm. That's you hit the nail on the head. I think sometimes we are therapists, right? We're not trained by to be therapists, but we have to play that role in some respects. And really, it comes down to asking the question, why? Why do you feel that way?
Yeah.
Is there some underlying, and I'm not a life planner. I didn't take all that training to be like, go super deep and keep asking questions. Like, that's never been me. But I think if you can ask that question a couple of times, like, why do you feel that way? Well, I'm worried about money. Like, okay, well, why do you feel that? Like, you just keep trying to get to the core. If we can get to the core of why that person feels that way, then we can help them get over that hurdle, right?
Yeah.
Is it some kind of ingrained money story that they have? Like, I'll share with you because we're friends. My parents were divorced at the age of probably 7 or 8, somewhere in that range, and we didn't have any money, dude. We were, and it wasn't for the lack of trying. My mother worked multiple jobs. My dad worked multiple jobs, and they did whatever they possibly could. They were just doomed from the start. They were 20 and 22 years old when they got married, and they had me, and without any education, right? So even I'm going to be creeping up on 47 this year, and I'm just now realizing like I have some insecurities about this stuff because of what I saw with them.
Mm.
So if you were my financial planner and you asked me that question, that's probably where I would go. And a lot of people have those money stories that they have lived their entire lives, and maybe they haven't even really thought about it. It's just it's part of their DNA, and if we can help them bring that out without getting too personal, right? If we can help them bring that out, we can help them get over that hurdle. So I've been trying to do a better job with that.
I had to do like 15 years ago, one of my corporate jobs, I had to do this sales training. And that was the big takeaway there was finding out people's why. And you ask a client something, and this was in a sales context. So you're trying to pitch them on something and they have an objection and you say why. And there's multiple layers usually to get down to what are they really objecting to. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
it's as easy as just saying why. Why? Like at some point you can't just keep slapping them with why to everything they say, but you get the point. Yeah, you dig down deep enough, there's going to be some underlying root reason that they gave you this series of objections or pushbacks or concerns or whatever it might be. And it was like, wow, like this actually really works. Most people have deeper rooted whys to their thoughts and beliefs and views and whatever. And to your point, right? Like a lot of yours might stem from childhood money scripts and experiences. And on the surface, it may not come across until someone really digs inquisitively and with genuineness to figure out your why. And that takes some work to do. You can't just take it at, face value necessarily.
Have you ever seen Simon Sinek's The Power of Why TED Talk?
Heard of the name, but no, no.
I would this ties perfectly into that. You should definitely check it out. Simon Sinek, Sinek, The Power of Why. And we used to actually we shared this with our team when I was coaching advisors, and it was one of the things that we went through, some of the training that we went through. I'm not great at it, but I have seen it in action, and I would concur with
Hmm,
your thoughts on this for sure.
okay, cool. Um, this one, I don't know, there's how many different ways to skin this cat, but for folks that want to retire or want to have enough but don't, and you're confident saying they don't have enough, how do you help them modify or adapt to get around the realizing there's not quite enough to do what they want to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a conversation about like what there's a finite amount of money, right? No matter who you are, there's a finite amount. It's either $400 million or $400,000 or $40,000, but we all have a finite amount of money that we have to work with. So we have to figure out what your priorities are, right? Like, are you okay with working a little bit longer, or maybe not taking 2 trips a year, or not putting kids through private school? Maybe they can go through public school. And I think it's really just having an honest conversation with them, saying, "Hey, listen, like we're gonna, the plan as it stands fails. Here are the reasons why. It's not it's not all doom and gloom, but there are options, and here they are." And being able to walk them through that and help them understand, like, okay, like here are the levers I can pull. I can
Yeah.
get a side gig, or I can do all the things I just mentioned, or whatever it is. This is where the coaching that we do comes in, especially for the younger crowd that we work with. At least me personally, we have clients. I think I have 6 or 8 clients right now where the only thing we're working out with them is their budget. because they don't teach this stuff in school, and
Right.
people don't know how to budget. And then they also allow lifestyle creep to come into play, where they start making more money, and then they ultimately start spending more money instead of saving the more money that they've earned. So we see this happen all the time, especially with the younger crowd. So I have taken, well, again, I have 6 or 8 people that the only thing we're working on is the budget. And thanks to the technology and the software we use, we meet once a month, we review it, like what kind of adjustments can we need to make? And we've had some pretty solid success stories come off of just doing those types of things with people.
Good. To your
Yeah.
point, schools teach you how to calculate the cotangent of a triangle, but don't tell you how to do taxes or budget. So go figure. Stuff you're going to
Yeah.
have to know in life, right?
No, of course not. Yeah.
All right, wrapping up here. If you can, I got one extra question for you. If you can
Oh,
give
okay.
only, well,
Bonus question. Bonus question.
well, one plus another. If you can give only one piece of advice or word of wisdom to listeners about retirement planning, what would it be? Now, this is directed toward consumers, not other advisors listening.
Yep. A good coach and mentor to me early on in my career, and a good friend of mine told me the very first day that he was my manager, he said, I want you to remember to use your resources. Use your resources. And I say that to colleagues and peers and people that have asked me similar questions in the past. I think that would be my go-to. Use your resources, but vet your resources, people. Right? Like you said earlier, the dude on TikTok who's pitching life insurance and all this other stuff, these get rich quick schemes, that is not a resource we should be leveraging, right? Like trusted, vetted, certified professionals that you can tap into, because they're all out here, right? Like, and you don't have to have $1 million in your brokerage account to work with people like us, right? Like we have people that we have an advisor on my team who does hourly and project based work. I do more of a long-standing, like subscription based, right? There are people that will do one-off engagements with you. There are people that will work with you for the next 20 years and manage all your, like, there's a ton of resources that are available out there to get you the help you need, regardless of what stage you're at in life. You just have to use your resources.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, the surprise question that's not on your list here is what should I ask you but didn't?
It's a good question, man. We covered a lot.
Put it back to you. It's like your
Yeah, no, no,
podcast.
I appreciate that. We covered a lot. I
We
think
did cover a
the
lot. These go long, sorry.
yeah, no, I think there are we are you kind of brought this up early on, I think, or maybe even before we hit record, but we are seeing a lot of gray divorces these days. A lot of people who are in 20, 30, 40-year marriages, and now the stuff is hitting the fan and they're deciding to go in a different direction and they're getting a divorce. And a lot of those people that we work with, not to be sexist, but a lot of people that we work with are women who are stay-at-home moms, didn't have a career, didn't have the education, they don't understand the financial aspects of things and so on. So my message to those people would be there is help. There are resources available, right? We people like us out here who can help you navigate this time. And it's never too late, right? Even if you've been married 40 years and this is happening to you, you still can get the support you need for the next chapter. But if you're on the other end of the spectrum and you're younger and you decide to be the stay-at-home spouse, it doesn't have to be a woman. I worked with some men who are the stay-at-home spouse. You still have to make sure you're participating in the family financials so you know what the heck is going on. Because, and this doesn't have to be a divorce either. I mean, if you've seen it in your work, as I've seen it in mine, there's usually one decision maker in the household.
Yeah.
There's one family CFO, and if you're not that person, you still need to be participating because you're doing yourself a disservice. That person could pass away, you could get a divorce, and you need to understand what the heck's going on, because if you don't, you're not going to be put in a good position, and it is going to be very, very tough to move on to the next phase of your life. So thank you for asking the question, but hopefully that helps.
Definitely did. Great advice. Thank you. So I see that a lot in a couple. One is usually decision maker. The other one's like, yeah, whatever. Just tell me what I have to sign.
Yep.
And I can see how it could be problematic when the decision maker is no longer in the picture for whatever the reason may be, and the other person's left to kind of fend for themselves financially now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, great points. All right, Jamie, this was awesome. Where can people go to find out more about you, your business, your podcast, etc.?
Yeah, I think the websites, I say that plural because we have two different companies, is are probably the best resources. All my contact information is on there. I'm one of those that puts my cell phone on the website so people can call me, they can text me. It just please don't do it at like, 2 o'clock on a Sunday when I'm trying to watch football or something. But even so, I will always do my best to respond. So if people have questions, they want to book a call, whatever it is, they can go to woodsonwm.com, which is the wealth management website for Woodson Wealth Management, or allegiantds.com, which is Allegiant Divorce Solutions. I'm sure you're going to give everybody the show the in the show notes the links or whatever, but
Yep.
the website's a great best place to start. You can book a complimentary call with us there. There's no obligation. It's all confidential too, especially if you're dealing with divorce. We do everything confidentially. We're not going to, we even try to tell people like use a different email address to keep things on the hush hush if need be. So don't worry about that.
Yeah. Okay. And I'll
Yeah.
also put a link to your podcast. And thanks for making your cell phone public. I'm going to start drunk texting you now. So if you get some,
You should. You should. I miss talking to you on a regular. We need to do it more often. I appreciate catching up with you today.
if you get a text like, Saturday night around midnight Eastern time and it doesn't make sense, you'll know who it's from. Just kidding. All right. Well, great, Jamie. This was awesome. Thank you very much for coming on and sharing. It's much appreciated.
Appreciate you.
All right. Take care, everyone.